So this is my Full House Goes to Disney World review, and this opening title, I should say, is a reference to a dry ice bombing that happened at Disneyland just a few days before this episode was released. It happened near Toontown, It's a Small World, that whole area. No one was hurt, thank God, but it was a pretty big news story for a couple of days, so I figured I should be topical and reference it. This behind-the-scenes footage comes from a segment of, I believe, a Disney World Easter Parade special that aired a few weeks before the Full House episode aired. It was just a little fluff promotional piece, but it's on YouTube, and I figured it would be more interesting to introduce with that than with clips from the actual episode. So this Full House review was a pretty pivotal video for me because this was the video that got me on Channel Awesome. When I applied to Channel Awesome in 2014, this was the first video I listed in the email as being a good example of this show and what I could do with it and what it was all about. I included a couple other favorite episodes at the end of the email just as a sort of, if you like that, then watch these too. But this episode was the big example I included because at the time I thought, it's the most sort of over-the-plate one. It's one of the more accessible episodes I've ever done because just about everyone around my age is familiar with Full House, and I don't make too many theme park in-jokes in this episode, and the ones I do make I kind of explain as I'm making them. And I do think, beyond that, this episode contains some of the best bits I've ever done. Having said that, there's also a lot of stuff in this episode that really kind of makes me cringe watching it now, and I'll point that out as I get to it. And of course, the whole family. Now, I admit it's a bit of a false narrative for me to have said, oh, Disney bought ABC and then all these shows went to Disney World, because actually the Full House Disney World episode aired a couple of years before Disney bought ABC. And I know that makes this entire retrospective a complete sham, and I should just give up and go home, but joke's on you, I already am at home recording this. Remember that San Francisco backdrop that used to be part of the Streets of America section of Disney's Hollywood Studios before it was all behind work walls and being turned into Star Wars land? That was boring. I'm glad it's being turned into something interesting. This Bob Saget montage was so much fun to edit, just going through all his DVDs and his comedy, just looking for little bits that were very funny but didn't have any swear words, which was a bit of a challenge for a Bob Saget set, but I specifically wanted it to be really funny bits that were only filthy if you know anything about anything and are not just some stupid kid. Because knowing what we know now, he probably snuck in "We'll discuss what makes you gag later" as an improv intended as some sort of filthy dog whistle. By the way, Filthy Dog Whistle is the name of my Mariah Carey cover band. Clips of kids cheering come from Wonder Chosen, a very funny, very dark, very not kid-friendly TV show from the mid-2000s that aired a couple of short seasons on MTV2. Very much worth your time. Wonder Chosen, go check it out. Now, I've since been informed that the characters do occasionally show up at the hotels, but never like that. You know, they never just walk around willy-nilly looking for random tourists to approach, unless, of course, it's something special you pay for, like a character meal or something. But I was also worried when I was writing this that this might turn into just a barrage of me going, that's not accurate to how the park experience really is, when, of course, it wouldn't be, because it's fucking TV. The Tea Party. Nostalgia for that simpler time when only crazy people thought the government was out to get them. And, of course, you can't discuss Bob Saget without at least briefly mentioning his cameo in Half-Baked, So Saith the Comedy Gods. So originally, this shot took place at Interventions, because at one point that was where we last saw Morgan. But then I cut her reaction line to the TV vomiting blood in the last episode. But I still wanted to keep They'll Never Find Me Here, which meant I needed to staple together these two bits into one, basically. And I guess I didn't communicate well enough to Morgan that that's what we were doing, because when we reshot, how is that a cliche? She was really confused of why she was suddenly running away from the Disney cops at the end and what that had to do with anything. Stefan Crosets did the Photoshop for that How I Met Your Mother gag, and very shortly after this episode came out, How I Met Your Mother released a teaser trailer for their last season where they basically did a less dark version of the exact same joke, but I did it first. Waylaid by Jackassery, a line I stole from the Venture Brothers. One big thing I regret about this episode was all the jokes about the personal lives of the cast of Full House, specifically John Stamos' failed marriage to Rebecca Romaine and Dave Coulier's infamous relationship with Alanis Morissette as immortalized in her hit song You Oughta Know. At the time, I think I rationalized it by saying, well, you know, they're celebrities, and this is what most people know them for anyway, but looking back, I think it was kind of a low blow. It was unnecessary of me. Now, did the Living Seas ever actually do this? Did they ever actually invite DJs to record shows in the Living Seas? Because it seems really impractical from every I mean, if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, but I never heard of that ever happening. You know, I know there were some bad Jaws sequels, but holy God, this was a new low. I don't know what they were thinking. Of all the Disney World episodes, Full House definitely had the most character interaction. I mean, I know Roseanne had the bit where Darlene talked to Winnie the Pooh, but that could be interpreted as just her talking to herself, and there was a little in Step by Step and Boy Meets World, but Full House definitely had the most scenes of grown adults pretending to have conversations with these characters as though they're real and talking. I probably would have made fun of that a little more, but of course that would have negated the end of the retrospective when Jerk has a crisis of faith upon learning the characters are just costumes with people in them, spoiler alert. I do really like this fake dialogue I came up with for Chip and Dale. I'm especially proud of, "This is why the Rescue Rangers broke up!" But I also am a little ashamed that I felt compelled to reference John Stamos' divorce in that, because I don't know John Stamos, I don't know Rebecca Romijn, I have no idea why they got divorced, and it's none of my business, so yeah, that was petty of me, I apologize. And of course, the nice thing about reviewing these Disney World shows at Disney World is I could do location shots like that, where I'm yelling at him from the same location where they shot it 20 years earlier. So we're coming up on the Dave Coulier animation scene, and for those who don't know, the magic of Disney Animation was a real animation studio / exhibit at Disney MGM from when the park opened in 1989 to when they shuttered hand-drawn animation in 2004 or so. And those animators had a hand in every Disney animated film produced in that time. They were even the main driving force behind a few of them. Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, and Brother Bear were all primarily produced in Florida. And it's just so weird, especially if you're an animation fan, to see Mark Henn show up in this, because he really was one of the superstars of the Disney Renaissance. Certainly one of the biggest who worked primarily in Florida, where he was the supervising animator of Mulan in Mulan, and Princess Jasmine in Aladdin, and young Simba in The Lion King, and in between Aladdin and The Lion King, he was animator in Full House! It'd be like if Charles Barkley did a cameo in something and he was just credited as basketball player. I do feel kind of bad about this Olivia Wilde joke coming up, which I always intended to be a sheer absurdity that someone like Olivia Wilde would be obsessed with some fat loser who looks like me, but I'm not sure that's how it came across. I think it might have come across as more of a stereotypical hack kind of, women be crazy. In my defense, I was going through my divorce around the time I made this, and when you go through a divorce, you don't really tend to have the most positive opinions about the opposite sex in general. Anyway, back to the fascinating history lesson. After Michael Eisner, in his infinite wisdom, decided hand-drawn animation was dead, that attraction turned into basically an animation museum, and that museum included a section called Animation Academy, where you could sit down at authentic-looking animation desks, and a Disney artist would teach you how to draw a certain character. And that's where we got this shot, where I'm scribbling furiously here, and I'm sure the people around us must have thought I was an escaped mental patient. But it was worth it, because it's one of my favorite gags in the episode. And I later found out Mark Henn did not do this animation, which I assumed he did at first, and that makes it even stupider that he just got credited as animator, because someone else was the animator! That floating white circle thingy is called Newtrack, and the human being in shot with him is my good friend Stefan Krosets, the co-founder of Geek Vision, who used to host a show called Animated Analysis, where he reviewed animated films, and Newtrack, which is of course cartoon spelled backwards, was his adorable animated sidekick. So you'll notice the pumpkin-y Halloween decorations in the background, because like I said, all the Florida stuff was shot in September of 2012. And every now and then those seasonal decorations are in shot and it looks a little weird, but oddly enough it took me so long to edit these things that by the time I released stuff like Step by Step and Roseanne, it was fall all over again, so it kinda worked. It took me a while to decide on what would be the funniest on-hold music for child services, and I think Charlie pitched Rape Me, and holy shit, look at the size of that fucking mullet. God damn it, Season 1 of Full House, why'd you have to have a semi-relevant clip that forced me to look at that stupid mullet? The dry ice gag at the end of this shot was added at the very, very last minute because at the end of the shot I'm shaking a water bottle and the dry ice bomb happened to be in a water bottle, so there you go. Like pretty much everyone who was born in the 80s, I grew up watching Full House when I was a dumb, stupid kid who didn't know good from bad. Although by the time the Disney World episode aired, I'd kinda outgrown it. I remember seeing a clip of it when it first aired, and I remember thinking, A, Full House is really getting desperate, and B, Disney World deserves better than this. Audio of Gilbert Gottfried from the Comedy Central roast of Bob Saget. And the bit where she points the wrong way to Splash Mountain is just so stupid and so easily avoided, and someone just wasn't paying attention. I mean, it's not like Splash Mountain is on the other side of the park on Tuesdays or something. It's just ridiculous. Dave actually had a theory about that, which I think might be true. I have no proof that it's true, but his theory was that maybe she originally said Space Mountain, which of course is in the direction she was pointing, and in post they were just like, nah, we gotta plug Splash Mountain as much as possible, because it's the big new thing, so they dubbed over it and hoped no one would notice. But I did, so they failed. But it took them 20 years to fail. Shut up. So I have to wonder, did they just really want to dress Scott Weinger up as Aladdin and they came up with this whole hallucination subplot to justify that? And if so, A, why not save Aladdin for the end so it's much more of a punchline to all that? And B, was it really even worth the effort? Because who watches Full House for in-jokes? This is a show pitched to the broadest possible audience. I think it would have literally broke the show to actually tell a joke that some people in the audience wouldn't get. The stuff I'm saying in front of Aladdin's Oasis there was originally going to be narration, but then when I edited this chunk, I realized, oh, I don't have enough footage of Scott Weinger as Aladdin to fill all this narration, because he's really only dressed as Aladdin for that one quick shot. And in the mythos of this show, not only did Steve actually fly out to Florida and book a room at the Grand Floridian just so he wouldn't have to be away from DJ for that long, but as I later found out, less than a year after this episode, DJ and Steve broke up. So, I said it as a joke, but it really was true. They got sick of each other sooner, and he wasted all that money. I might feel sorry for him if he wasn't fictional. And kind of a dumbass. And a complete dumbass. And I later learned that apparently this whole Aladdin setup thing was actually shot in Disneyland in California and not Disney World. So points to Full House. I did not notice that, and that's a testament to how effectively they hid that. One thing I didn't point out in the review is that in the episode they say it's a one-day only promotion, which is not much of a promotion for a Disney park. I'm sure they were just saying that to cover themselves so that families wouldn't come to Disney World and demand to rub the lamp in the Prince or Princess for a Day promotion, but it's a stupid contrivance. I always hated Michelle. Even when I liked the show, I hated Michelle. It always seemed like she learned the exact same "don't be such a little shit all the time" lesson in every episode, and then next week she was right back to being a little shit again. They needed to abandon her in war-torn Somalia. That would have solved everything. There's the Eisner as a Bond villain character taking a very realistic bite out of Jeffrey Kitty Katzenberg, a name I just love. And this was the very first shot I got for the ABC retrospective, shot in the Beast Library at the Animation Building at DCA on the same day I got the Bond villain Eisner shots for the Epcot retrospective just before I went to Florida. See, here's an example of what a little shit Michelle is. She's making her sisters ride the carousel 10 times in a row, even though she lives in San Francisco, which at least at the time had an awesome carousel in Golden Gate Park. I grew up in San Francisco myself. I went to that Golden Gate Park carousel all the time. It fulfilled all my carousel needs that I could have ever wanted. And whenever I went to Disneyland when I was a kid, I never rode King Arthur Carousel because I was like, yeah, it's a carousel. Who cares? We've got one of those at home. Let's ride real rides. But Michelle just wants to stay in her little comfort zone and not let her sisters try anything new because she's a little shit who only thinks about herself, and people wonder how we got Trump. Fuck Michelle Tanner. I have hate in my heart for her. But you know what I don't have hate in my heart for? This conversation. This might be my single favorite thing I've ever written, and it was written mostly through improv with myself, if that makes any sense. I kind of made this all up one line at a time while I was editing until finally I got to, what's 9/11? I don't know, which just still cracks me up. I am immodest. And I literally came up with more jokes about Michelle being missing than I could actually squeeze into the episode. I had a joke about her sisters only going after her because she could help them cut in line. I had a joke referencing the theme song of when you're lost out there and you're all alone, no one's waiting to carry you home, shit like that. Eventually, I just pared it down to my favorites. It's definitely a scenario rife for riffing. Coming up is a parody of the music video for Runaway Train by Soul Asylum, a very famous and very powerful 90s video which showed pictures of runaway kids. So I just asked all my friends if they'd be willing to send me pictures of themselves as little kids, and Mikey, Zach, and Stefan were the first three to respond. I asked Michael why it was easier to train oil drillers to become astronauts than it was to train astronauts to become oil drillers, and he told me to shut the fuck up. So that was the end of that talk. He's like, jerk, just shut up, okay? This is a real plan, alright? I was like, you mean it's a real plan at NASA to train oil drillers? He's like, just shut your mouth! Making fun of Jodie Sweetin's meth addiction because good taste is timeless. So I wanted to get this next reaction shot on the same bench where they're sitting, but when we got to the Grand Floridian, the entire beach area was behind work walls for refurbishment. I guess the sand broke down or something. So we chose a bench in a nearby courtyard, and there were some landscapers nearby doing really loud landscaping work with what sounded like chainsaws, and it took a really long time for me to get the line out, even though it's a really short line, just because we kept getting interrupted by Jodie Sweetin, by the way, went on to play Walt Disney's Aunt Charlotte in the unauthorized biopic Walt Before Mickey, which I still to this day have not seen, but I'm sure I'll see it eventually. And of course this episode was made before we did have marriage equality, at least temporarily. I just this moment noticed he's wearing shorts and a blazer. That's gotta be some sort of violation of the Geneva Convention. Putting that little nod right there is really what made this bit magical, I think. That just that air of you're welcome after stating such complete nonsense. This line about Michelle defecting to SeaWorld is a reference to, remember those Olsen Twins Mysteries VHS tapes that came out in the mid-90s? Well, one of them took place at SeaWorld. It was like Olsen Twins Mysteries presents the SeaWorld Mystery or something like that. And for all I know, it might have been filmed on the exact same trip that brought the Olsen Twins to Florida for the Full House Disney World episode, so I had to tie it all together. Cramdlog, of course, is my last name Goldmark spelled backwards, and there's me with an inside-out sweatshirt and no glasses. And coming up is another Dry Ice reference I added at the very last minute because the explosion was near It's a Small World. I should mention my title card artist for the ABC retrospective, Ian K. Robbins, who by the time he was done with these ABC title cards had rebranded himself as I. Knox Robbins, a very talented artist and animator who sent me a message on Twitter one day out of the blue saying, "Hey, I really love your videos, would you like me to do some title cards for you?" And I looked at his artwork and I just fell in love with it immediately. It's so wonderfully cartoonish and smooth and really, really well done. And he did all the title card artwork for the ABC retrospective completely for free, and I'm very, very grateful to him because they all came out looking amazing.
Are you even listening to yourself?
I mean, this is a little bit of a logic stretch, let's face it. They don't know jack about drilling. How hard can it be? Aim the drill at the ground and turn it on. You think it's just drilling a hole? There's a lot you gotta know about how when you're gonna break snap off the edge of a tranny in a corner in a hot pipe, and you're gonna get a gas pocket. Like, yeah, well, what about when the booster rockets don't fire and your EVA suit and the zero Didn't you see Apollo 13, boy? More Dave Coulier Alanis Morissette references via her portrayal of God in Kevin Smith's Dogma. For all the below-the-belt pot shots I made towards the Full House cast, I can't believe I didn't call out Candace Cameron Bure for being a crazy fundamentalist Christian nutcase. I mean, that would have been fair game, because she chose to be loud and proud with that shit. The rest of this shit is just tabloid nonsense. And using this to-be-continued title from the Full House episode is a tradition I've continued on all multi-parters ever since this one, and I hope to continue it on all multi-parters to come. This song is Warren Zevon performing I Was in the House When the House Burned Down on, I think, Letterman, And let that be a tip to you video makers. If you want to include a song without any narration or anything over it, and you're afraid of it getting detected by the copyright bots, use a live version of it, preferably a clip from a TV show that you find on YouTube, because they're only looking for the recording, not the composition. Originally on Blip, the end credits music here was a song called House by Ben Folds 5, but when I uploaded that to YouTube, it got blocked. And this is basically me tonally recreating some of the more delightful conversations I had with my ex-wife. I'm taking a lot of anger towards her out on Olivia Wilde, who did nothing to deserve it, and I really apologize for that once again. I've never met Olivia Wilde. I have no reason to believe she's not a wonderful person, and that was uncalled for. And that is it. That is the Full House commentary. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will join me again tomorrow for the Family Matters commentary.